Hello BookTube, my name is Kate, this is my channel Chapter Kate, and today I have another quick announcement video for you. And that is that Nori from Reading with Nori and myself are going to be hosting a week-long graphic novel / comic book readathon. This is going to be taking place in the first week of December, so December 1st through the 7th, and all the challenges are based on a bingo board that we created to kind of cover a variety of interesting sort of topics / qualities of different graphic novels and comic books. Nori and myself were both really in the mood for a graphic novel or comic book readathon. I posted a tweet asking if anyone knew about any, and I got a couple of recommendations. A couple of the readathons that were recommended to me were Panelathon and Get Graphicathon. Panelathon is a week-long comic book readathon that takes place in May, and then Get Graphicathon is another one that takes place over a weekend in August. So Nori and I were talking, and we decided that we really wanted to have another comic book or graphic novel readathon. BookTube is full of readathons that are very much focused on novels, and we just really need more graphic novel and comic book readathons. We need more of it. And so this is what we came up with. The Kaboomathon. Like, you know, like the big kabooms. Kapow. Bam. Here's a quick look of our bingo board, which you can find on our Twitter account, which I will post in the description. And what I'm going to do is go through each of the prompts on the bingo board individually and just explain them really quick. Each of these prompts applies to a comic book or graphic novel, so I don't have to say that each time. So the first prompt is black and white, and that's read one that is black and white. For example, The Gigantic Beard That Was Evil by Stephen Collins would qualify for this prompt because everything in here is black and white. Grayscale, yeah. In this book, the main character kind of wakes up and does the exact same thing every day, and everyone in the town is very used to everything being in its place. The main character's name is Dave, and he is completely hairless, aside from one hair on his chin. And then one day, his chin hair decides to take over and grow into this gigantic beard with a mind of its own. It's a great book. And if you decide to read this, I definitely suggest doing it while listening to Eternal Flame by the Bangles on repeat. You'll see why. The second prompt is from another time, and this could be any time in the future or the past. This could also be one that deals with time travel. Anything to do with that. For example, Violent Cases by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Dave McKean, who I love both of them. They're both great. Violent Cases takes place around the time a little bit after Al Capone was at large. I don't know around what year that is, honestly, because my brain does not process. It's around the mobster time. I don't know, and mobsters were a thing with their fancy suits and such. And this kind of follows this little kid who starts talking to this osteopath, and the osteopath happened to maybe have been involved in the arrest of Al Capone a little bit, or kind of involved in something to do with Al Capone and may have gotten away with some things. I don't know. But the thing that I really like about this is that everything is sort of drawn very much from the child's perspective, and it lends itself to a very unreliable narrator sort of style. The way someone looks may change depending on new information that he acquires and things like that. And of course it's Neil Gaiman, so like, it's great storytelling. Yeah. The next prompt on here is Kate's Pick, and this is a comic book that I want you to read. Now I could have either picked a book that I have read that I've loved, or one that I want to read that I love, and I'm going with the latter there. And so my pick is Ward's Valley by Bobby Curnow and Brenda Hickey. This follows a grumpy little gnome who just wants to be left alone when all these people are invading his home. And that includes forest animals and human beings and all that jazz. He just wants some peace and quiet. I got it because there was a gnome on the cover, and I love gnomes. The next square is Marvel vs. DC, and this is to read a comic from either one. You can choose your favorite, or you can choose one that you haven't read a lot of. Personally, I've read a lot more DC than Marvel because the way that I originally got into like comic books when I was younger was reading Batman, so I'm actually going to go with DC for this one. And one of my favorite DC graphic novels is actually Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison, and it is illustrated by Dave McKean, who does most of Neil Gaiman's graphic novels. I absolutely love his art style. It's very layered and interesting to me. Plus his art style is very appropriate for like sort of the creepiness of this. As someone who works in mental health and has mental illness, I am very hesitant to approach things that take place in Arkham Asylum and that deal with that. And of course, I don't think anything that deals with Arkham Asylum is going to be perfect. But there are a few things that I really liked about this particular comic book. In this one, Batman makes his way into Arkham Asylum, and it follows his visit with all the folks in there. The main thing that stood out to me in this is that every Batman thing that I've seen like in the past has referred to Two-Face as having multiple personality disorder, which is just not true. One, it's now called dissociative identity disorder, and it is highly villainized and not fair to those that have the diagnosis. And two, he definitely doesn't qualify for that. And I like that in this particular book they don't label him as such. They talk about him having an issue with dualities and an obsession with chance, but they do not say that he has multiple personality disorder, which is just, for me, that's a win. That's great. Good job. And again, the art style is just great. The next space is Noris Pick, and you're going to have to watch her video announcement to find out what that is. You can also look on our Twitter where we will announce our picks. And our Twitter is just Kaboomathon. It's very simple. Matches the title. It's great. And the next square is one that has racial diversity. So for example, I recently enjoyed Hungry Ghost by Anthony Bourdain, and it's illustrated by Joel Rose. I loved this book because the setting is at this dinner party where everyone is telling sort of ghost stories from around the world. So you have a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different types of people in this book. Also, there's like recipes from around the world in the back, which is great if you can cook, because I can't, but like if I could, I would cook them, maybe. The next space is next in a series, and this is to read the next volume in a series. If you haven't started a series and there's not a series that you're trying to continue, then maybe you can start a series for this instead. I'll allow it. But I desperately needed this space because I have several series that I'm working on. The one that I've been working on the longest, though, is probably the Sandman Universe by Neil Gaiman. I think I've read like the first maybe 4 or 5? Something like that, and I just really need to get on with my life and finish it. It's great. And I just really need to get on with it because I love Neil Gaiman's writing and I love this universe. The Sandman Universe mainly follows Dream, who is one of the 7 Endless, and these are all beings that sort of represent different things. So Dream is one of them. We have Delirium, who used to be Delight. Delirium is very, very colorful and all over the place. Delirium reminds me very much of what Mania feels like. And then of course you have Death, who is this really cool goth chick. And you have Desire and Despair, who are twins. Despair is like a very gray, naked person, and then Desire is a gender fluid being who morphs back and forth and between genders. It's cool. And then there's also Destiny and Destruction. I hate living near a fire station and under an airport. If you do decide to pick up the Sandman series, just know going in that it's very complex, the world is very dense, there's a lot going on, and it's kind of hard to keep up with at times, but it's really great and beautiful and amazing and great and perfect in every way because it's Neil Gaiman. So like, then on the next space we have non-human MC or main character, and this is just to read one that has a non-human main character. It's pretty straightforward. And of course there are several comic books and graphic novels that had non-human main characters, and there might be even more if you decide that mutant characters classify as non-human, but it's up to you. Up to your discretion. But one that might qualify is The Spire, and this is by Simon Spurrier, Jeff Stokely, and Andre May. The main character of this is actually a Medusae? Yes. And she is actually the last of her species. She has like these white things that come out of her and can grab stuff. They're kind of like tentacles, but they're just like strings. It's weird. But the main character of this, her name is Shaw, and then she is the commander of the City Watch. A series of murders starts showing up in the city, so she has to get to the bottom of that mystery as well as the mystery of her past. There are also LGBTQIA plus themes in this book if that is something that you really, really are trying to look for. And I personally really love the art style as well. Honestly, I don't like to read graphic novels if I don't like the art style, so there's that. And speaking of LGBTQIA plus rep, that is also the next square on this bingo board. Something that I feel compelled to mention is that you can also double up on these challenges or triple up, whatever you have to do to get as many of them done as you want. It's a readathon, not a career. Go for it. Another example of a book with LGBTQIA plus representation is The Infinite Loop by Pierre Collinet and Elsa Chartier. So basically the main character of this is like a time travel type person, but she has to travel in time and find sort of abnormalities in time. But then she kind of falls in love with one of those abnormalities, which is fair because she's like a hot chick with purple hair. I mean, but then she sort of has to turn her back on her training and things like that, and it gets to be a little bit difficult. And she sort of has to assess how much she's willing to give up for her chance at true love. Next, we have a retelling, and I think that the only retelling that I have on my shelves is probably Snow Glass Apples by Neil Gaiman and Colleen Doran. So this is actually an illustrated version of a short story of Neil Gaiman's that I read in Smoke and Mirrors. And it's basically a Snow White retelling where Snow White's really creepy. So I actually saw this Tumblr post one time where it was like, what if Snow White is actually a vampire? I mean, she's got pale skin and ruby red lips, probably from all the blood and stuff like that. And this gets it right. It's also great for those people that like a little bit of horror in their graphic novels. The next square is To the Library, and this is to read a comic book or graphic novel from the library. A lot of times libraries will also have access to Hoopla. So sometimes you can read them on your mobile device or on your computer or whatever. But this is just to support your local library and check something out. And then the next square is to read one that has political undertones, which honestly the majority of comics have political undertones. So most would work for this. One that I'm going to mention is V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. This takes place in a dystopian future where England has given itself over to fascism, and it explores the loss of freedom and identity in a totalitarian world. But it's also very dense, so I don't know if it's great for a week-long readathon or not. It's up to you. But Alan Moore, a lot of his writing is very dense, and all of that has political undertones, including Watchmen and Swamp Thing. So any of those are great. Then we have Out of Your Comfort Zone, and this is to obviously read one that's you wouldn't normally go to. When I was first brought into sort of the comic book world, I was reading Batman, and then I went quickly to Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, so I read a lot of darker, really heavy comic books and graphic novels. So quite a few of the ones I've read recently have been out of my comfort zone, such as Paper Girls, or even the one that I'm about to mention, which is Snot Girl, and this is by Brian Lee O'Malley and Leslie Young. Just from the get-go, it's so bright and colorful, which I have started to love in graphic novels and comic books, but typically I used to go for like the darker looking ones, and this does have a dark twist to it. It's got a little bit of murder mystery going on. But on top of all that, the main character is a fashion blogger, which is not something I would have ever gone to. She's got this bright green, awesome hair, but she also has terrible allergies. I love it, and it has a lot of sort of play with social media on here and the way it's formatted and stuff. If you've ever read the Scott Pilgrim series, Brian Lee O'Malley did that, and it plays a lot with video games. So this does the same thing, but with social media. I only have the first two. I think the third one either comes out end of this year or beginning of next year. I can't remember. I mean, obviously you can get single issues, but... The next is This Just In, and this is to read a 2019 new release. I don't read a lot of new releases of anything because I just don't. I've tried to read more new releases this year of books, still haven't really with comic books. But I did find one on my shelf that's a new release that I haven't read yet, but it is a new release, and that is Coda Volume 1. This is by Simon Spurrier and Matthias Bergara, and this follows a bard and his mutant unicorn in a post-apocalyptic world, and I'm here for it. I haven't read it yet, so I can't like recommend it, but it looks awesome. The next is to read a graphic memoir. I've read a few, and I'm actually going to recommend two, but for two different prompts. For this specific prompt, I'm going to recommend El Defo by C.C. Bell. This actually doesn't appear to be a graphic memoir at first glance, but it's actually sort of a graphic memoir of her childhood, growing up deaf. The main character has to wear this large hearing aid around her neck. It's really, really large, and she starts kind of creating these superpowers and superhero daydreams out of her assistive devices. My friend Chris gave this to me, and I read it after I started trying to get back into learning ASL. There's not a lot of sign language in this because it's really important to know that all deaf people have different relationships to the deaf community, and I just really enjoyed this sort of perspective. And the next prompt is chronic illness or disability representation, and this can be seen in a lot of different ways. The majority of deaf people that I have spoken with do not consider deafness to be a disability, so I'm not going to be recommending any of the graphic novels that have that representation for that prompt. What I am going to be recommending is another graphic memoir that I've talked about a lot on my channel before, and that is Marbles, Mania, Depression, Michelangelo, and Me by Ellen Forney. The main character of this has bipolar disorder, and that's a mental illness. It's a chronic illness, one that I live with every day. It's invisible, so it's not something that a lot of people would think of when they think of chronic illness, but it is something that you live with your whole life. This gave such an interesting look at bipolar disorder. A lot of people with bipolar disorder are in creative fields and do creative things, and when they're manic, they feel like that's a superpower, like they're just really great when they're in that mode. And I think this did a really good job of sort of dealing with that thought process and that mindset. So this not only, addresses a chronic illness, it is also a graphic memoir, and it's in black and white, so covers a couple of things there. And those are all of the prompts on our bingo board for Kaboomathon. Be sure to check out Nori's announcement video when she posts it, and it will also be linked in my description of this video. And of course, be sure to follow us on Twitter as well. If you would like more of this junk, subscribe below. Bye! Tripping over shadows and I'm drowning in the night. I feel the soldiers coming and I'm putting up a fight.